Welcome to the New Books Network.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Ferry. Welcome to another rebroadcast from the RTB archives.
From Brandeis University, welcome to Recall This Book, a podcast that looks backward to see into the future. Our idea is to put together scholars and writers from different disciplines to make sense of contemporary issues, problems, and events by looking at books that shape the world we inherited. Our topic today is the comic novel, its past, its future, and most importantly, its present. What do we read comic novels for? Do they comfort us? Do they unsettle us? Do they make us better? Do they make us worse? Are they the predecessor of sitcoms or a classier alternative to TV? I'm sure that the answer to all those questions is probably no, but it will be revealed in the next half hour. And today I am a solo host, so hello, John Plotz, and I'm lucky to be joined by Steve McCauley. You probably know him as the author of a raft of comic novels. They include recent favorites like My Ex-Life, which he had a wonderful interview about with Terry Gross on Fresh Air, Alternatives to Sex, and even and Insignificant Others. Perhaps, like me, you have been his fan ever since Object of My Affection, or perhaps you came on board more recently when he started publishing his Tales from the Yoga Studio series under the delightful pen name of Rain Mitchell. So I love every phase of Stephen McCauley's career, and I'm really honored to be speaking with him today. So, Steve, welcome. Hello.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're delighted with every phase of my career.
I am.
I'm not delighted with any phase of my career, so maybe,
well,
but that
I think
balances
it's the terminal one I'm going to like best of all. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I really want the yoga series to be a very long and fruitful phase.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah, I think that phase has passed already, but
really,
we can get to that later.
Okay. My wife just signed us up for a gentle yoga class, so I think I definitely need something to guide me into that world.
Yeah.
You know that I can barely touch my knees, right? So,
really?
Yeah.
You are doing it now.
Well, I am touching my knees now, but this is I'm crammed into a chair.
That's
yeah.
true. That's true. That helps.
Yeah. So Steve and I put our heads together and decided we would start in a curious kind of way today, which is to start by trading favorite lines from Barbara Pym, whom we have both decided is, if not the queen of the comic novel, then at least one of its reigning monarchs. Okay, so Steve, can I start by asking you, why have we decided that, and who is Barbara Pym exactly?
So Barbara Pym is a British novelist who had two interesting phases to her career. She was born in 1913, I believe, and she published 6 novels that were fairly successful. They were well received. They had a readership.
Yep.
And then she wrote
Starting in 1950, I think.
Yeah. And she very much feels like a mid-century novelist to me. Her sensibility and pushing against more contemporary issues and themes in the later half of the century. Yeah. But in any case, she wrote her 7th novel, which is called An Unsuitable Attachment, and her publisher decided that it was not current enough, that she didn't have an audience, and he turned it down. It was turned down by many publishers, and this kind of launched her into a period of kind of darkness, both personal and professional.
Yeah. And so that was like in 1963, I think, that she wrote it. So I guess sort of the Beatles are big. Cars are suddenly painted bright colors in England, and everybody is swinging, and they thought she wasn't swinging.
And she indeed was not swinging.
Yeah.
She was writing about, villages and curates and anthropologists and things that were not really of the moment, I suppose.
You could argue about anthologists. Those were kind of...
Well, that's true. But not her anthropologist.
Yeah, that's true.
But in any case, and then, do you remember the year that this came out? There was a Times Literary Supplement in, I think, 1977 or 78, and they named... They asked a bunch of prominent writers and and
Right.
social critics.
Including Philip Larkin, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that was, so Quartet in Autumn, which is the first one after that, came out in 1977. So maybe it was just before that?
So it was just before that. So maybe it was around 1976. And they asked all these people to name the most underrated British novelist. And Philip Larkin and one other person both named Barbara Pym, which kind of inspired a lot of interest in her work. Yeah. And then she finally published this novel called Quartet in Autumn. And her career was revitalized. And that was the period in which I began reading her and in which a lot of Americans that I knew discovered her and just became tremendously fond of her whole body of work.
Yeah. So you mentioned really quickly the mid-century. So in other words, the people you think about with her first phase are someone like Muriel Spark. Is that right? Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Would that be a good comparison for what who she was writing with? Yeah,
I think that's right. I mean, I think that her name is sometimes mentioned with Muriel Sparks. I'm not sure it's quite. Muriel Sparks seems much more adventuresome stylistically and much more edgy in terms of what she does with characters, I think, than Pym.
Okay, so that's interesting. I kind of want to get back to that question of what the edge is, because maybe we disagree about this, but part of what I love about comic novels is it seems to me that there really is an edge there, but it's just sometimes a little bit buried, and it's not necessarily there in the characters per se. In other words, the people's lives themselves may not be that grandiose, but the edge might be at a deeper level. But
and I think it's also in the attitude toward their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this probably her Barbara Pym's best known novel is called Excellent Women. Mm-hmm. And this was I believe it was her second published novel.
Yeah, 1952.
Yeah. And, this is the narrator talking about herself. I suppose an unmarried woman just over 30 who lives alone and has no apparent ties must expect to find herself involved or interested in other people's business. And if she is also a clergyman's daughter, then one might really say that there is no hope for her. And, it's such a kind of sharp-eyed look at the character looking at herself. Yeah. And later she says, she compares herself to Jane Eyre in what I think is a very amusing way, but I'm not sure I can find it right now. But anyway.
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite lines, since it seems like we've now started quoting favorite lines, one of the favorite lines that I was going to pick out from An Unsuitable Attachment, which, as you said, Steve, is the one that kind of got her kicked to the curb originally, but then was reissued. Right. I think only after she died.
After her death.
Yeah. So also talking about a parish priest. Although invariably kind and courteous, he had the air of seeming not to be particularly interested in human beings, a somewhat doubtful quality in a parish priest, though it had its advantages. I just love the crisscrossing of that sentence. It brings you sort of to the left bank and then back to the right bank and then back to the left bank again. Somewhat doubtful, though it had its advantages.
Right.
So it does. I think this really goes along with the point you're making about the attitude taken towards characters, even though they may be in a very banal and apparently benign setting.
Yeah.
But, even those settings have their swift water and their dark places.
Yeah. And this quality of being able to see both sides or all sides of a person's character, I think, is very much Barbara Pym.
But what I was going to say, so taking Jane Eyre or Middlemarch as our model, these are novels that they're meant to be real. I mean, they define the word realism, and yet they're always about moral improvement. Either the moral improvement of the characters who are supposed to have come to a better place in life, or implicitly because the reader is meant to be, improved out of their bad habits, out of their laziness, out of their desire to sit around reading novels. By the end of the novel, there's going to have been a nudge. It's kind of the difference between the is and the ought. Mm-hmm. Like it opens up that space. And I do think that comic novels are so delightful because they drop that moral pretense or something like that. Like they're not improving you.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I was trying to get at, whether they're better than sitcoms, I mean, I just think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but sitcoms can be so moral. They always have a moral.
You're right.
It's like they have to. It has to be redemption at the end.
So they're better by not being moral. In other words, is what you're saying.
The comic novel.
Yeah. The comic novel.
I mean, and obviously we're talking in gross generalizations here. But I mean, I think that the one of the reasons that comic novels can be so subversive is because they're not trying to do that. Yeah. And if you think about something like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Luce, which was published in the 1920s, and you have a character.
I tried to write a novel about her once, actually. I love her.
About Anita Luce?
Yeah. It was about her early days because, she was in California just sending screenplays into Griffith, trying to get them produced.
And I think she actually sold them when she was about 14.
Yeah, she's a little bit older because she lied about her age. She actually didn't start selling them until she's like 21 or 22. She's from a theatrical family. Yeah. It's a really interesting story. In my novel, she meets Mark Twain on the Lower East Side in 1905, which I don't think actually did happen, but
it might.
But the point is that I think of her as taking the mantle of Mark Twain for sure.
Yeah.
So sorry. So go ahead.
But Lorelei Lee, the character, the famous character of in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, is a gold digger. She is completely amoral. She is only out to improve herself in terms of wealth, and will just destroy as many marriages and wreck as many homes as she possibly can. And unlike say in Edith Wharton, where there's no character quite like that in Edith Wharton, but nonetheless.
No, but if Lily Bart is on the rise.
Yes,
and then
she must be punished, right?
Chloral will be administered, Yeah.
But,
that's a great point.
She triumphs. Lorelei Lee triumphs.
So then Becky Sharp in Vanity Fair is your... Sorry, go ahead. No, Lorelei.
Well, I was just going to say, after all, she is the person who coined the phrase, Anita Luce's, diamonds are a girl's best friend, right? Which is pretty subversive.
Did she coin Gentlemen Prefer Blondes also, or is that...
Well, that's the title of the book.
Yeah, right? But I
don't know.
It's hers. Okay, we'll give it to her.
Well, let's give it to her.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point also about sitcoms needing to trot out the moral, the big moral hammers at the end.
Right.
Okay. Well, so that really does make me think about Vanity Fair as the one 19th century realist novel that actually sort of refuses the moral improvement path. And there's a super interesting story to be told about how, like, later novelists who loved Thackeray, I think, insisted on misreading him. So George Eliot loves him, Trollope loves him, Charlotte Bronte loves him, but I don't think they get that anti-moral side to him.
Yeah.
So wait,
it'd be hilarious to think of Charlotte Bronte as a comic novelist.
But she dedicated, Jane Eyre is dedicated to Thackeray because she said that Vanity Fair did what she wanted Jane Eyre to do. So, it's really funny. I agree. Maybe that gets to another thing, Steve, that you were interested in talking about, which is whether the comic novel gets the respect it deserves. And maybe we could start by getting at a question that you, I know, think about, which is like distinguishing the respect it gets in America versus the respect it gets in England. Is that worth talking about? Who are the American comic novelists? Like you mentioned Anita Luce. Would you put, does Mark Twain fit in the comic novel? Because I was thinking, because he himself says he does humorous writing, not comical.
He did. I don't know. What do you think?
I really don't know because I take his distinction seems really interesting to me. He says that comedy is where you basically have a gag and that humorous writing is more like getting into a particular voice and just extending that voice.
Right.
So, even Huck Finn is humorous because you're sort of entering into the mind of Huck.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that might be right. Though he's incredibly funny on a line-by-line basis, too. But I think he's not trying to do the same thing that comic novels are.
But aren't there scenes in Huck Finn that seem sort of broadly comedic?
Absolutely. Yes, there are.
So maybe he was just trying to distance himself from the scourge of being labeled a comic novelist.
I think that makes sense because there were these, comic writers before him who he was trying to push away.
Yeah.
So what about somebody like James Thurber then?
Well, to me, he's more of a humorist. I'm not sure really what the distinction is if I could really make it very precise, but it seems to me that what he was doing was a little different.
Yeah. So can I give you a James Thurber line that I was thinking about whether it applies to the comic novel or not? So Thurber said, "The laughter of man is more terrible than his tears and takes more forms hollow, heartless, mirthless, maniacal." Is that too dark for you?
No, I love it. Yeah, I think it's great.
He also said, here's another one that seemed to me to kind of get at what I love about comic novels. Man has gone long enough, or perhaps too long, without being man enough to face the simple truth that the trouble with man is man. Which I take to mean something like that you can outrun everything except yourself. You know, that a lot of novels that we call realist, including those novels that I love in the, sort of George Eliot tradition, have this vision that if you can just get far enough, then you will not carry your own troubles with you.
Right,
all those things you didn't like about yourself can somehow be, just shed.
Right.
Whereas the point of the comic novel is kind of like, if you look behind you, your butt is still there.
Yeah. So it's
no matter how fast you're going, your butt will still be the same distance from your mouth as it was before.
Yeah. So there's that question of the kind of lack of redemption, or I don't know.
Well, something about just that we're earthy, like it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think it's interesting. One of Barbara Pym's novels is called Less Than Angels, right? And I kind of feel like that's right. Like more than dirt.
Right.
Like we're not just dirt, because then there wouldn't be anything to say.
Yeah.
But we're not angels either.
Yeah.
So.
And the shifts in her characters are very, very subtle. I mean, we don't see big changes in her characters, from the beginning to the end. I mean, they open up just a little bit and let in maybe a little bit more light or a little bit more warmth, perhaps. But they're not completely transformed by their experiences.
Yeah.
I also think the other thing that's maybe this is a little off topic, but that's just so fascinating to me about having read a couple of her novels recently, reread, is the lack of what we typically think of as plot. That they are just they are almost like these anthropological studies of a period of time within a village and observations of the people's behavior.
Yeah. So I have another line that sort of goes to that, and then I have a question to ask you, which is basically like how important the sentence is in the comic novel, or whether anything else is as important as the sentence. Okay, so this is a line which is, one of the young men who may or may not be involved with. It's about, he's just seeing a woman he might be interested in. The heavy scent she wore tantalized him because it was one he knew, though he could not remember its name. So far that could be a sentence from like any realist novel, any mystery, any romance, anything. Though he could not remember its name, whether it was an evocative French phrase or a downright English word like carpet or swamp.
Yeah.
And I just, so we're like, I was talking about that other sentence that kind of crisscrosses. This one to me, it's more just like it lands with a thump, like you think you're gliding through a gentle forest glade and then you smack into a concrete wall. Like carpet or swamp.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the sentence, it's like those words are just so perfectly chosen.
Right.
And they not only because of what they, refer to in concrete terms, but also just the sound of the words.
Yeah.
And,
good diphthongs. Like swamp has two good diphthongs in it. Yeah. So I guess, my question is, for that, it is whether what's satisfying in Barbara Pym is just really funny sentences, or whether it's what the funny sentences are doing. I mean,
I think it's both, right? Because I think that she both has this phrasing that is very well chosen, and I'm sure does not trip off the top of the tongue as they appear to be on the page. But also that, what you just read reveals something about the character, or reveals something about their attitude towards themselves as a British person, et cetera. So I think it's both. I think it has to be both, or else to have the depth of comic resonance, and also just kind of, human, I don't know, observation that her novels have.
So this is a totally banal question, but do you think there's a limit to how long a comic novel can be? I can't help noticing how short they are.
There's a limit to how long hers can be.
Yeah.
I mean, Vanity Fair is pretty long.
It's true.
Novel.
I know. Yeah. I guess I'm not... Tristram Shandy. Oh, interesting. Okay. That's a gag book, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let me ask it another way. Like James Thurber, I mean, there's many reasons that Thurber doesn't fit, but partly he was a sketch writer, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking there's a way in which it's not easy to write 20 pages worth of funny material. I mean, I can't do it, but
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have done it. Like
Yeah.
if you think about The New Yorker is full of brilliant writers who can sustain something for 15 pages.
Right.
But Barbara Pym and you, and we're about to get to you, like are people who can write novels that are, 200 pages long. And that's, so I guess I'm flipping the question of the length, but I mean, it does seem like it's rare to be able to pull it off
Well, maybe
a novel length.
Well, sure. I mean, anything is difficult to pull off for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the novel that I have read most recently that just exhausted me with its comic brilliance is The Sellout by Paul Beatty. And I
wish Elizabeth Ferry were here because she completely agrees with you.
Yeah. And that, I mean, almost to the point where, okay, I just had to put the book down and say, I give up, because it's like every sentence is so brilliant.
Right.
And so witty and so extraordinarily well constructed to both make a point, which is invariably extremely subversive, and also hilariously funny, although you find yourself like wary of laughing at it sometimes. But, it's rare to be able to sustain that for that.
Yeah. So do you have a thought about that? I mean, again, this is another version of the question about like, carpet or swamp. Like I just have this image of Barbara Pym doing stand-up in some club in north of England and Bradford. Yeah. I got a lot of great material here, but somehow it isn't just that. She strings together those. I take your point. You're saying that the sentences work because they're funny in their own terms, but they also go to revealing something about, the way this character sees the world as distinct from how all the people around them see it.
I think in the case of Pym, maybe even more so than in the case of The Sellout, is that it's all about the context of the characters and the world that she has created for them. And that's what makes it funny, is the context of their relationships with each other, what they overlook, what they refuse to discuss, and so on. To me, that's crucial. So I don't think of her as being a stand-up, person at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, would you say, what about Philip Roth, for instance? Like Portnoy's Complaint is basically a 300-page stand-up routine.
Right.
It's a 300-page Lenny Bruce routine, only actually funnier, I think.
Yeah. So does he count? So is that a comic novel then?
Oh, man, I think so.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Don't you?
It's so terrible to admit, but I've never been able to finish that book. I mean,
Really?
I like his later ones.
Yeah.
Like, I like Exit Ghost, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the ones. So it's not that I don't like him when he's being sharp and sort of one-linerish, but I feel like Philip Roth is better. I don't know. I love American Pastoral.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love it. I think he's better when he turns that wit into something. I feel like sometimes Philip Roth is stacking up razor blades. Like sometimes he's just cutting. And Portnoy's Complaint to me, it's just like, it feels like flailing. I believe you that it isn't. But when I read American Pastoral, I feel like it's actually like adding up to something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Portnoy's Complaint, I think one of the great things about Portnoy's Complaint is that it feels, and I believe this is how it was written, supposedly, was just someone sitting down and ranting, for however long it took him to get out the first draft of that novel.
Yeah.
And that too is an incredibly exhausting novel. And, the last line of the novel, or the last word is this, kind of cry in front of the therapist, right? And you, as a reader, you share that feeling like, ah.
Yeah. Okay, but so this is great, because I would have said, like, if we think about Barbara Pym, she's not exhausting. Like, there's lots of things.
No.
It's comforting, right?
It's more subtle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think
one of but it's also not raw. I mean, it doesn't feel.
Well, there's a kindness to it at the same time that I think she is misunderstood. And sometimes I will say to people, "Oh, have you read Barbara Pym?" And they say, "Oh, is she that like cozy writer with the kind of
I didn't mean cozy.
the book covers that look like wallpaper and so on, and which is what they do look like."
Yeah.
But she's not at all, because she is so incisive, and because she's really quite critical, and there's a real darkness there. And if it weren't for the funny twist and of the carpet and so, a lot of these people's lives might be considered tragic.
Right.
But what was your question?
Well, I mean, no, the question is like whether the rawness of that kind of cry at the end of Portnoy's complaint and the subtleness of Barbara Pym are like on the same spectrum or not. And I hear what you're saying. You're saying that it's a subtler kind of vinegar that she's dispensing, but I almost feel like it's vinegar she's made into lemonade. Like to me, the comic novel, it's hit the sweet and sour balance, right?
Right.
And it's not cozy, but I think you can say that something is comforting without it being cozy. Like there's lots of novelists I find incredibly comforting to read. Yes,
and in fact, I know that you're not fond of this author, but I'm equally obsessed with Anita Brookner, who wrote 27 novels, I believe, and they're all basically about loneliness, about some form of loneliness, kind of lives that have not advanced in the way that the character hoped that they would advance, and so on and so forth. It is the opposite, and she has a very bleak vision. She's witty. She's certainly not comic, and she sometimes is funny.
Right.
But anyway, a friend who I've turned on to her, we all say the same thing. This is like the least comforting worldview you can imagine, and yet there's something tremendously comforting about opening up one of her books and entering that world again. And